Do your deals get lost in the middle of a sales process? Let's go from a world where deals lose momentum after a demo to a world where they move forward and expand. Let's improve your scoping process. Here's what we're trying to accomplish in scoping. And just as a little bit of context, scoping mostly happens after you've completed your software demo and before you share your proposal. Not entirely, but the idea is that most of what we're going to talk about is essentially an effort to kind of use the momentum from our software demo to help us kind of move this deal forward in a really productive way. And so one of the things you're trying to accomplish is to establish the breadth and depth of that deal, right? So your demo has kind of gotten the prospect excited about using the product, but there's a lot of potential use cases out there. And so in the scoping process, we're really going to kind of hone in and decide which of those use cases or teams or product modules should be part of the engagement that we go forward with. The second thing you're trying to accomplish is value certainty. And the idea here is that you're going to prove that the product can really deliver. So the demo has probably given them a great window into the product. But if your product is complicated, they may feel that it's likely that it can deliver, but they may need more proof to really understand that it's going to deliver in their context. And then the third key thing is consensus. And this is all about getting all of the different stakeholders and kind of getting the right support from them and engaging each of those stakeholders in a way that is going to be very persuasive to them. So let's dig into this idea of the breadth and depth of the deal. And the core idea here is that you want to use your scoping process to grow the deal. So let's look at where we are. So we are kind of coming out of our demo, and hopefully what we've done is we have developed a lot of motivation on the part of the prospect to really explore the product. And specifically what we want to see is that our champion really wants to help us, right? And the champion is typically a mid-level manager who's kind of close enough to the problem to care about solving it, but also high enough up in the organization that they can really help us move something forward. And so hopefully, as we're kind of coming out of the demo, the champion sees that this product is going to be really beneficial to their team, and they're motivated to help us move this forward and explore how it can help. And hopefully, they also believe that we as salespeople are really credible, right? If they introduce us to colleagues, that conversation is going to be useful, and we're gonna give candid information as well. And as they think about their interests in helping us grow this deal, one of the things that they want for their own team is a better deal, right? So typically the team manager might think, oh, well, I could purchase just for my team, but if I help the whole company use this product, we'll get a much lower per unit price, and that'll end up being a really good deal for my team. So there's a very kind of concrete motivation for them to help you grow the deal. And then I think more generally, the champion hopefully feels that that your product is going to deliver incredible benefit to their company, and if they're kind of the motivating force in helping it have that benefit, well, heck, that is an achievement for them. That reflects well on them, and it will help their career advancement. So what we want to do is we want to take this motivation and use it to perform an identification process. And here what we're doing essentially is to try to find all of the potential use cases for the product and all of the potential teams that might use it. So we're basically coming up with a list of possibilities for how we might potentially grow the breadth and depth of this deal. And then having identified those possibilities, we're going to move to proof. And here what we're doing is we're proving value to each of the different use cases and teams where the product could fit. And then once we've kind of gotten a sense of where we can really prove that value, that then enables us to deliver a proposal that includes the right use cases and teams and makes it clear that, hey, there's tremendous benefit for you. And if you buy for all of these use cases and teams, you as a company will get a really excellent deal. So it's a win for everybody. Well, one of the kind of challenges in performing this process is to identify decision components. And the idea here is that as you're growing the breadth and depth of a deal, what you're really trying to do often is to get the prospect to make a series of decisions that collectively result in a larger deal. And just to do a little bit of compare and contrast. So if you think about a simple deal, usually it's just one decision, right? The prospect is deciding, should we buy or not, right? Very simple. But with larger, more complex deals, often the final deal is kind of the sum of multiple choices. So, for example, there might be three teams that could potentially use the product, and the prospect could buy for all three teams, for two of them, for just one, or for none of them. Similarly, there might be multiple modules to your product, and the prospect could be deciding to buy all three, or just two, or one, or actually not buy any of them. And another aspect here is that often with larger, more complex deals, there are multiple people making the decision. So in a multi-team sale, the finance and operations teams might have different decision makers, right, and separate budgets. And so we've got to convince each of these decision makers and tap each of these budgets. And if we can appeal to all of these decision components, right, the different teams or the different modules, that leads to a larger deal. So how do we actually go about doing this? The big picture here is that as you are trying to prove value to multiple decision components and kind of roll them all up into a larger deal, it may feel a little bit like you're running multiple sales processes at the same time, and they're all kind of at different stages, and they kind of come together at the end. So here's an example. So let's say we've done a great software demo for our first decision component, right? The first kind of team and user group that we're thinking about. And afterwards, we have a huddle with a champion and we say, hey, we can get you a better deal if we're able to grow the breadth and depth of this deal. And do you have any ideas for who else might use this product? And the champion says, gosh, I sure do. Here are some ideas. And so the champion helps us then make contact with a separate group of users, right? And now that group of users hasn't really seen the product before. So we're kind of starting at the beginning, right? We're going to do an overview presentation, which is typically the first step in our sales process for them. And then we're going to do a demo for that user group, right? So this is at a different kind of step in the process with our second component than we are with our first. And the champion also helps us get in touch with a separate department, right? And that department, again, we've got to kind of start from the beginning and do an overview for them and then do a demo for them. Now, meanwhile, we are forging forward with our original decision component. We're continuing to have additional conversations with them. And then it all kind of comes together in one big combined proposal that results in a very large deal, but also under very attractive commercial terms. So everyone is happy with the result. Now, one of the challenges as you're addressing all of these different decision components is that every decision component is a little bit different, right? Different teams care about slightly different things. And so you need to speak to what they care about. The most important way that you're going to do that is by adapting your summary slides, right? And these are as you'll recall, kind of the three slides that lead off most of your sales conversations. That summarize the problems you solve, the solutions you offer, and the impacts you deliver, right? Problems lead to solutions, lead to impacts, right? P.S.I, hence P.S.I selling. So you probably got a good set of summary slides, maybe for your product in general or for their company in general. But when you go to talk to the finance team specifically, you want to incorporate facts that apply to that finance team. You want to use their terminology, and you want it to reflect their priorities, right? And so one really common way that this might work is that you've got three problems that your product solves, but problem two is really the problem that the finance team cares most about. So, reorder the problem. So that's kind of the primary problem, and spend more of your time on that than you do on the others. And then you go to talk to the sales team, right? Same process, right? Use facts that are relevant to them, use their terminology, and then be sure that you are reflecting their priorities. So the second major thing that you're going to do in scoping is value certainty, and this is basically showing that you can deliver. And so recall the idea here is that the demo has probably given folks a sense of real promise in the product, but for complex deals, it hasn't really completely proven that it's actually going to deliver. And so you have to think about ways to really prove it. And so here are some ideas that you could consider. So one is a case study presentation. And this basically shows them how a similar company used your product. Another is an application presentation. And this basically presents a preliminary sense of how they would use the product in their situation and what it would do specifically for them. Another is an application demo. And this basically, you basically do some light configuration on the product so that they see a kind of a sense of what it would look like in their situation. Obviously, it's not a full implementation, but that sometimes that light configuration kind of lets them see how it's going to work for them. Another is a trial or a proof of concept. This is really powerful, right? It's a free chance to use the product. They get real experience with the product, but you also need to be sure that it's set up well to succeed. You don't want to do kind of a half-assed trial that fails because it's very hard to recover from that. And then another way to do this is to do an ROI workshop. And this is basically a joint meeting with the prospect to develop a business case for the product that is relevant to their setting. So it's kind of a team effort to kind of figure out the business case that works for them. So one of the really important questions in doing value certainty is a question of when should you do a trial? And the idea here is you only want to do it when it's set up to succeed and move the process forward. And so if trials are really difficult to pull off well, then think about putting them after you deliver a proposal. And so the order here is that you do your scoping and you get a sense of the potential breadth and depth of the deal. And then you share a proposal that outlines the specific options that they should consider. And then the trial helps them decide on the options that you've given them in the proposal, right? Should they do option 1 or option 2 or option 3 from the proposal? And it's important to do that because by the time you've delivered a proposal, you think it's a really serious deal. They think it's a really promising possibility. And we're close to making a decision. So everybody is really motivated to dig in and really evaluate seriously. And then that trial then leads directly to the decision. The third big kind of element of scoping is the idea of consensus. And this is where you're going around and getting kind of the right support from all of the different stakeholders. The thing that's interesting about getting consensus is that you have to consider not just who the stakeholders are, but what you need from each of those stakeholders and what those stakeholders really kind of care about. And so here's an example that will illustrate the idea that different stakeholders, like you need different things from them, and they care about different things as well. So let's look at some stakeholders, what kind of support you need, and what that stakeholder cares about. So first off is our team manager, right? And this is typically your champion who is helping you move the deal forward. And you need their active support, right? If without an engaged champion, it's going to be very hard to move this deal forward. Their key interest is that the product solves the problem, right? They are close enough to a problem that their team is having that they are really motivated to get it solved. And so if you can show them that, that's going to go a long way to getting their active support. Now, another kind of persona that you're going to encounter frequently is a vice president or another sort of executive. This is the person who's going to ultimately kind of approve the budget and the project. And again, you need their active support, right? You want them to allocate money to this project. But their interest is it's a little bit different than the team manager. So the core kind of role of a great executive is to make priority choices about resources. Right? Their team faces a large number of problems, a large number of potential opportunities. They have to decide which ones are worth limited time and money. And so for them, you've got to show not just that it's helpful, but that it stands out among their potential projects as something that's really worth doing. It's in other words, it's worth the investment. Another group of folks you might encounter is a group of users, right? And these are typically the individual contributors who are going to be in the product every day using it. Now, they don't control the budget, right? They're not the executive in charge of the team. Really, you just need them to not like block the purchase, right? If they really hate your product, they might revolt, and then the team manager and the VP might say, well, we like this product, but we don't want to play World War II about this, so we just won't do it. So you just need them to not block the purchase. They don't have to be enthusiastic though. And what they care about is that product reasonably usable, right? They're going to be the ones who are in it every day. And then there's the CFO, right? And the CFO at the end of the day, you need them to approve the purchase, right? They're not your advocate, but they need to sign off on the budget. And what they care about is this a financially responsible investment? And if it is, then and you've got kind of support from the manager and the VP, then they'll sign off on it. So the other kind of interesting nuance here is that each of these different stakeholders, you should be engaging them in different ways because of their different roles and interests. So let's look at our four stakeholders. And what we'll do is we'll define a first choice way to engage with the stakeholder. This is the way that is good for everybody. It works for you. It's a reasonable amount of effort. It's persuasive to the stakeholder, and it's therefore your first choice. And then we'll look at your second choice, where what do you do if you're not able to get that access or if there's some other issue? So for a team manager, usually the best way to engage in this is with a combination of presentations and demos. Right? Presentations are really good at covering the big picture, and the team manager cares about the big picture. Demos are good for showing, how the product works and proving that it works. Managers care about that too. They're kind of close to their team. So you'll probably do a combination of these two things. Now, if for whatever reason you're having a hard time getting access to a manager, then you can always share summary slides, right? They're basically a business case in 3 slides. It's kind of an easy way to engage with somebody. Now, for our vice president, I would lean strongly toward trying to engage them with presentations as opposed to demos. Remember, the VP is the executive. They care about the big picture. They're not as much in the weeds, and presentations help you clearly present the big picture without getting bogged down. So if you're able to get access to the VP, lean strongly toward presentations. And if you can't, summary slides will kind of help you summarize the business case for them. And then ideally, it's kind of the team manager presenting the summary slides, so they're sort of following your guidelines for that conversation when they're talking to their VP. Now, for our user group, they care more about the nitty gritty. So they're probably really focused on seeing a demo because they want to see how it's going to work. And that works for you too, right? You do a demo, maybe you record it and send it to the folks that couldn't attend. Good kind of way to engage for everybody. Now, your second choice is to do a trial, right? There'll be some user groups who really want to get their hands on the product and get in there and use it. And obviously trials are the best way to do that. You would rather not do a trial, right? It's time consuming, but if you have to, that's kind of your backup option. And then you've got your CFO. In a perfect world, you're able to present to them directly and answer their questions. But if that doesn't work, you can share summary slides or a written business case. And again, like ideally, yeah, you're giving them the slides, but the slides are kind of talking points for your team manager, and the team manager goes to the CFO and kind of uses the summary slides as guidelines for their conversation with the CFO. So these are some great ways to accomplish a really successful scoping process. So to take things forward and learn more about PSI selling, check out our website. There you'll find resources on effective discovery, strategic negotiation, hidden gem hiring, structured demos, persuasive sales writing, and action onboarding. And with that, most importantly, as always, happy selling.